Part 1 Extended. I needed somewhere to go. I stood there longer than necessary, watching Linda cradle the warm mug between her palms like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. The woman who once ran a household with ironclad grace now looked like someone afraid the floor might give out beneath her feet. "You can take the guest room," I said finally. "It's not fancy, but it's quiet." Her eyes widened. "You still have it." I nodded. Some things never found a reason to leave. That was a lie. I'd found many reasons. I just never followed through. She rose slowly, as if her knees might betray her, and followed me down the narrow hallway. The apartment felt different with her in it, heavier, like old memories were being shaken loose from the walls. When she reached the guest room door, she stopped. "You don't owe me this," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "But tonight isn't about owing anyone anything." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. After she settled in, I retreated to the kitchen, more out of habit than hunger. I stared into the open fridge, replaying the image of her sitting on my couch. Of all the people who could have walked into my life again, she was the one I least expected, and somehow the one that hurt the most. I remembered the first time I'd met her. How she'd assessed me quietly, then handed me a towel and asked me to help dry dishes like I already belonged there. I remembered the way she'd squeezed my hand the night her son proposed, only for that ring to come off less than a year later. The sound of a soft knock pulled me back. "May I?" Linda asked, gesturing toward the kitchen doorway. Of course. She leaned against the counter, watching me like she was afraid I'd vanish if she blinked too long. "I didn't just come because I had nowhere else," she said. I waited. "He's different now," she continued. "Your ex. He's colder. Everything has to be his way. If I disagree, he reminds me of everything he's paid for." My jaw tightened. "He always liked leverage." She nodded. "You saw it before I did." Silence filled the space again, thicker this time. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping briefly across the walls. It felt like the world was moving on while we stayed frozen in something unresolved. "I should have called you when he left," she said suddenly. I picked up the phone a dozen times. "Why didn't you?" Her voice dropped. "Because he told me not to. He said staying neutral was the only way to keep the peace." I let out a bitter breath. Neutral usually just means siding with the louder voice. "I know," she whispered. "And I regret it every day." Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not all at once, but enough to sting. "I spent months wondering what I'd done wrong," I admitted. "Not just with him, with you, with everyone." She stepped closer. "You didn't fail us. We failed you." That was when I noticed it, a faint bruise on her wrist, yellowed at the edges like it was healing. My stomach dropped. "Linda," I said carefully, "how did that happen?" She instinctively pulled her sleeve down. "It's nothing." "It's never nothing," I said. She looked away. I tripped. I didn't push, but the unease settled deep in my chest. This wasn't just about a house being sold. This was about a woman slowly losing ground in her own life. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the apartment made me tense. I kept imagining his car outside, his knock at the door, the familiar tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while doing something cruel. I hadn't heard from him in 2 years. Blocking him had been the hardest, healthiest thing I'd ever done. And now his presence felt closer than ever. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps. Linda stood in the hallway, clutching a blanket. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to wake you. Sleep doesn't come easily anymore." I sat up. "You can sit." She perched on the edge of the bed, eyes rimmed red. "Do you ever miss him?" The question landed harder than expected. "I miss who I thought he was," I said after a moment. "Not who he turned out to be." She nodded slowly. "That's the hardest part, loving the memory while fearing the reality." We sat there, two people connected by the same wound, finally acknowledging it from opposite sides. "I heard him on the phone last week," she said quietly. "Talking about you." My heart skipped. "What did he say?" "That you were always too soft. That you'd never really moved on." I laughed, sharp and humorless. Projection was always his favorite hobby. She looked at me with something like admiration. "You survived him." "So did you," I said gently. She shook her head. "Not yet." When she finally returned to the guest room, I locked the door behind her and leaned against it, breathing deeply. Letting her stay wasn't just kindness, it was a line drawn in sand I hadn't planned to revisit. But as I turned off the light, one thought echoed louder than the rest. If my ex found out his mother was under my roof, it wouldn't be a coincidence. It would be a confrontation. And something told me this time, he wouldn't be coming alone, or quietly. Part 2, he wasn't supposed to find us like this. The knock came at 7:12 a.m. Not a polite knock, not a neighborly one. 3 sharp raps, measured, deliberate. The kind that didn't ask permission. Linda was already awake. I could tell because her door opened a crack just as I stepped into the hallway. Her face drained of color the moment she heard it again. "That's him," she whispered. My heart began to pound, but my voice stayed steady. "Stay here." Another knock, harder this time. "I know you're home," he called from the other side of the door. His voice, it slid through me like ice water. Familiar. Controlled. Still convinced the world bent toward him if he pressed hard enough. I opened the door before he could knock again. He stood there in a tailored coat, hair perfectly styled, eyes sharp with calculation. For half a second, surprise flickered across his face when he saw me. Then he smiled. "Well," he said, slow and amused. "This is nostalgic. What do you want?" I asked. He leaned casually against the doorframe like he owned the place. "My mother. She's safe," I replied. "And she's staying here." His smile tightened. "That's not your decision. It is when she chooses it." Behind me, I felt rather than saw Linda step forward. "I told you not to come," she said. He turned to her, voice instantly softening. "Mom, you worried me. You threatened me," she shot back. That wiped the smile off his face. I stepped fully between them. "You need to leave." He laughed, quiet, disbelieving. "You always did this. Insert yourself where you don't belong." Linda's voice shook, but it didn't break. "She belongs more than you ever did." That stopped him. He stared at his mother like she'd just spoken a foreign language. "What did you tell her?" he asked, eyes narrowing. "Nothing you didn't already do," she said. "I just stopped hiding it." He exhaled sharply and looked at me again. "You really want to get involved in this? After everything?" I crossed my arms. "You don't get to use our past as leverage anymore." Something dark flickered in his eyes. "You always thought you were stronger than you are," he said. "That's why this is happening." I felt it then, the shift. This wasn't about concern. This was about control slipping through his fingers. "Tell her," I said, without looking at Linda. "Tell her why you're really selling the house." Silence. Linda stared at him. What does she mean? He didn't answer. "Tell her," I repeated. Finally, he scoffed. "Fine. I needed liquidity. Investors don't like complications." My stomach dropped. "Complications like what?" "Like a pending investigation," Linda said quietly. I turned to her. "What?" She swallowed. "He's been moving money through shell accounts. Using my name on some of them." I looked at him in disbelief. "You framed your own mother." "I protected her," he snapped. "If things went sideways, she'd have been taken care of." "That's not protection," I said. "That's exploitation." His jaw clenched. "You don't understand how the world works." Linda stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "I understand enough. You planned to let me take the fall." He opened his mouth to deny it, then stopped. "Because we both knew the truth. I raised you better than this," she said, tears spilling freely now. "But somewhere along the way, you decided love was optional." He looked away. "That was all it took." "Leave," I said again, louder now. "Or I call the police." He hesitated, calculating. Then he straightened his coat. "This isn't over," he said to me. "You've always been a liability. And you've always been afraid of anyone you couldn't control," I replied. He paused at the door, turning once more to his mother. "You're making a mistake." "No," she said softly. "I'm fixing one." The door closed behind him with a final, echoing click. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Linda collapsed into a chair, shaking. "I was so afraid you'd believe him," she whispered. I knelt in front of her. "I believe you." She reached for my hand and held it like an anchor. "I kept the letter," she said suddenly. "The one you wrote him." I figured. "I gave it to my lawyer," she continued. "Along with everything else." I blinked. "Everything?" She nodded. "Documents. Recordings. Bank statements." A slow realization spread through me. "You planned this." "I planned to survive," she corrected gently. "And I hoped, if things went wrong, you'd still be who I remembered." Emotion clogged my throat. I said. Just, stronger. She smiled through tears. You always were. That night, after the apartment finally went quiet, I stood by the window watching the city glow below. For years, I'd thought healing meant distance, cutting ties, closing doors. But sometimes, healing meant standing your ground when the past came knocking. Linda joined me, handing me a cup of tea. You saved me, she said. I shook my head. You saved yourself. I just opened the door. She squeezed my hand. Somewhere out there, my ex was realizing for the first time that the people he'd underestimated were no longer afraid of him. And for the first time in a long time, neither was I.